The wind coming from Lake Michigan carried the sharp scent of autumn across the city as the taxi stopped in front of the Grand Valmont Hotel. Towering walls of glass reflected the afternoon sky, while uniformed attendants moved quietly beneath enormous marble columns. Businessmen hurried through the revolving doors. Expensive cars waited along the curb. Somewhere high above the city, behind polished windows and guarded entrances, Adriano Moretti was waiting. At least that was what Isabella Romano Moretti believed. Bella stepped carefully onto the sidewalk, one hand resting against the gentle curve of her stomach. 8 months of pregnancy had changed the way she moved, but not the warmth that still filled her heart whenever she thought of her husband. She smiled as her son shifted slightly beneath her hand. "Easy, little one," she whispered. In her other hand, she carried a small white gift box decorated with a pale blue ribbon. Inside the box rested a pair of handmade baby booties and the first ultrasound photograph she and Adriano had taken together months earlier. She had spent days preparing the surprise. For 3 long weeks, Adriano had remained in Chicago, claiming that urgent meetings connected to the family business empire required his attention. He had apologized repeatedly for missing dinners, family gatherings, and even 2 prenatal appointments. Bella had forgiven him every time. That was what wives did. The Moretti empire stretched across several countries. Officially, it controlled shipping companies, investment firms, technology businesses, luxury hotels, and private security organizations. Unofficially, rumors connected the family name to far more dangerous activities. Bella had never asked unnecessary questions. She had fallen in love with the man, not the empire. Years earlier, she had built an impressive reputation as one of the most talented forensic financial analysts in New York. Hidden accounts, shell companies, and complicated ownership structures had once been as familiar to her as breathing. Then she had met Adriano. He had been charming, intelligent, ambitious, and unexpectedly kind. When they married, Bella willingly stepped away from the career she loved. Adriano promised that she would never regret choosing family over business. For 5 years, she believed him. A hotel employee approached with a polite smile and said, "Welcome to the Valmont, Mrs. Moretti." Bella returned the smile and said, "Thank you." She glanced upward toward the highest floors of the building. Adriano had no idea she was coming. She had carefully arranged everything herself, using reward points from the family travel account to book the flight. The thought of surprising him filled her with excitement. She could already imagine the expression on his face. She would place the tiny booties into his hands. He would laugh, and perhaps he would even cry. For all his power and reputation, Adriano possessed an almost boyish excitement whenever the baby was mentioned. Bella stepped into the elegant lobby and crossed the polished marble floor. Soft piano music drifted through the air. Enormous crystal chandeliers cast warm light across expensive paintings and carefully arranged flowers. A few minutes later, the elevator doors opened. Bella stepped inside alone. The mirrored walls reflected a woman she barely recognized. Her dark hair rested softly against her shoulders, and the navy blue dress she wore flowed gracefully over her stomach. Happiness still shone in her eyes. The elevator climbed higher, 20th floor, 25th floor, 30th floor. With each passing second, her excitement grew. She imagined Adriano standing near the windows of the luxurious suite. Perhaps he was studying reports from advisors or speaking with members of the family council. Perhaps he was already planning names for their son. She smiled as she remembered the argument they had shared only days earlier. Adriano wanted to name the child after his grandfather. Bella insisted that the boy deserved his own name and his own future. The elevator doors opened quietly. The hallway before her was silent. Thick carpets softened her footsteps as she walked towards Suite 3108. Golden lights illuminated expensive artwork hanging along the walls. The city stretched endlessly beyond the windows at the end of the corridor. Bella tightened her fingers around the white gift box. Just a few more steps. Everything was about to change. She was close enough to see the suite number when the sound reached her. A woman's laughter. Bella stopped walking. The laugh was soft, elegant, and strangely familiar. She remained perfectly still. A moment later, she heard the gentle sound of crystal touching crystal. Someone moved a chair. Papers slid across a table. For several seconds, silence returned. Then another voice spoke. It was Adriano. There was no possibility of mistake. Bella knew that deep, calm voice better than she knew her own. Her heart immediately began beating faster. At first, she smiled. Perhaps relatives from the family council were inside the suite. Perhaps advisors had joined the meeting unexpectedly. Then the woman laughed again. This time the sound was closer, more comfortable, more intimate. Bella suddenly felt an unfamiliar chill spread through her chest. She looked down at the white gift box resting in her hands. Inside it, the tiny blue booties waited patiently beside the ultrasound photograph. Bella took one slow step toward the door, another. Then she heard Adriano speaking once more. His voice was low, confident, and almost amused. He said, "She believes she's surprising me." And in that single moment, the world she had trusted for 5 years began to crack. Bella remained motionless outside suite 3108. One hand rested protectively against her stomach, while the other tightened around the small white gift box. Only moments earlier, she had imagined placing the tiny blue booties into Adriano's hands. Now, every sound coming from the other side of the door seemed to carry the weight of a completely different future. Inside the suite, someone poured a drink into a crystal glass. Ice struck the side with a soft, delicate sound. Another chair moved across the floor. Bella tried to convince herself that she had misunderstood what she had heard. Perhaps members of the family council were attending the meeting. Perhaps the woman was an attorney, an assistant, or an advisor from one of the family companies. Then the woman spoke again. "Are you certain everything is ready?" Bella immediately recognized the voice. Bianca Rixa. For a brief moment, Bella could not breathe. Bianca had attended family celebrations, charity events, and formal dinners at the Moretti estate. Elegant, intelligent, and endlessly charming, she had spent years earning the trust of everyone around her, including Bella herself. Adriano answered calmly, "Everything is proceeding exactly as planned." Bianca laughed softly and asked, "And Bella still suspects nothing?" "Nothing at all," he replied. The words struck harder than any blow. Bella instinctively lowered herself onto a decorative bench near the door. The child inside her shifted gently, and she placed her hand over her stomach as though she could shield her son from the conversation unfolding only a few feet away. Another sound reached her ears. Paper. Someone was turning pages. Bianca lowered her voice and asked, "What about the Romano holdings?" Adriano answered immediately, "The transfer will happen after the birth." Bella frowned. The Romano holdings belonged to her family. Generations earlier, her grandfather had established a protective network of trusts, investments, and properties intended to safeguard future heirs. Even after marrying Adriano, portions of those assets remained under her authority. She listened more carefully. "And the signatures?" Bianca asked. "She'll sign," he said. "You're very confident." "Bella trusts me." The hallway suddenly felt colder. Bella looked down at her wedding ring. For 5 years, she had worn it with absolute pride. She remembered the day Adriano had placed it on her finger. He had promised to protect her for the rest of their lives. Now, another woman was discussing her future while sitting beside her husband. The sound of a pen clicking echoed from inside the suite. "What happens when the child is born?" Bianca asked. Adriano did not hesitate. "The child changes nothing." Bella felt her heartbeat stumble. For several seconds, she simply stared at the closed door before her. She had prepared herself for many possibilities during the long weeks of Adriano's absence. She had prepared herself for loneliness, disappointment, frustration, and even betrayal. She had never prepared herself for indifference. Bianca spoke once more. "What if she refuses?" Adriano laughed quietly. "She won't. And if she does?" Silence followed. Bella unconsciously held her breath. Finally, Adriano answered. "By then, she'll have no leverage left." The sentence settled over the corridor like winter frost. Leverage, not wife, not mother, not Bella. Leverage. The word immediately awakened something that had been sleeping inside her for years. Before becoming Bella Moretti, she had been one of the most respected forensic analysts on Wall Street. She had spent years tracing hidden transactions, uncovering false declarations, and exposing elaborate financial schemes. Suddenly, every word she had heard began arranging itself into a pattern. Transfer, timing, holdings, signatures, leverage. None of those words belonged inside a marriage. They belonged inside negotiations, inside strategies, inside conspiracies. Another page turned. Bianca spoke again. Once she signs, everything becomes irreversible. Adriano answered with chilling certainty. Exactly. Bella slowly opened her phone and entered the notes application. Her fingers still trembled, but her thoughts had become strangely clear. She recorded the time, the suite number, and every sentence she could remember. Then she heard Adriano speak again. After tonight, there won't be anything left to worry about. At that moment, Bella understood something that frightened her even more than the affair itself. She was not standing outside the door of her husband's hotel suite. She was standing outside the entrance to a carefully constructed secret, and somehow she and her unborn son had become part of the plan. Bella stared at the glowing screen of her phone while the voices behind the door continued rising and falling in quiet conversation. Years earlier, numbers had been her language. Hidden patterns, missing entries, unexplained transfers, and carefully disguised ownership structures had formed the foundation of her career. She had once spent 6 months uncovering an international fraud scheme that had fooled experienced auditors, attorneys, and investors. Back then, colleagues often joked that Bella could hear dishonesty before she could see it. Standing outside Suite 3108, she discovered that the old instincts had never disappeared. They had merely been sleeping. Another page turned inside the room. "The council still doesn't know everything," Bianca said. Adriano answered immediately. "They know exactly what they need to know." Bella's eyes narrowed. That sentence sounded familiar. Years earlier, she had heard almost identical words spoken by the chief executive of a company that eventually collapsed after investigators discovered hidden liabilities worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Powerful men always believed information belonged to them. They convinced themselves that secrecy was wisdom and control was protection. For the first time since arriving at the hotel, Bella stopped thinking like a wife. She started thinking like an investigator. She opened a new document on her phone and carefully typed every phrase she could remember. "She trusts me. The child changes nothing. The transfer will happen after the birth. Once she signs, everything becomes irreversible. By then, she will have no leverage left. The council knows only what it needs to know." Bella looked at the list for several seconds. Separately, the sentences meant very little. Together, they painted the outline of something much larger than betrayal. Inside the suite, crystal glasses touched again. Bianca lowered her voice, and the investigation. Bella froze. A long silence followed. Finally, Adriano spoke. "They don't have enough. Are you sure? I've survived much worse." Bella slowly lowered the phone into her lap. Investigation. The word changed everything. Adriano had not denied that an investigation existed. He had simply declared that the investigators lacked something. Evidence, witnesses, records, perhaps all three. Her heart pounded heavily against her chest. Officially, the Moretti empire controlled shipping companies, private security firms, technology businesses, luxury hotels, investment groups, and construction corporations spread across several countries. Unofficially, countless rumors surrounded the family. Journalists, competitors, and law enforcement agencies had spent years attempting to separate truth from legend. Bella had never participated in those conversations. She had trusted Adriano completely. Now she wondered whether that trust had been his greatest advantage. Another memory suddenly surfaced. 3 days earlier, a courier had delivered several documents to the family estate. Adriano had called shortly afterward. "Routine updates," he had explained. Bella smiled bitterly as she remembered the conversation. She had not opened the envelope. She had intended to sign the papers after reading them carefully during the weekend. For the first time in years, she felt grateful that she had postponed the task. Inside the suite, Bianca spoke once more. "What happens if Bella discovers the truth?" Adriano laughed softly. "She won't." The certainty in his voice disturbed her more than the words themselves. He wasn't hoping she would remain ignorant. He was expecting it. The baby shifted gently beneath her dress, and Bella instinctively placed both hands against her stomach. "Everything will be all right," she silently promised. Then another sound interrupted her thoughts. A metallic click. The door handle moved. Bella reacted instantly. She stood, picked up the white gift box, slipped her phone into her purse, and quietly disappeared into the decorative alcove beside the elevators. A second later, the door opened. Adriano Moretti stepped into the hallway. Even from a distance, his presence was unmistakable. His charcoal suit fit perfectly. His dark hair was neatly combed. The silver watch Bella had given him years earlier rested against his wrist. He looked exactly like the man she loved. Then he glanced cautiously in both directions. Bella stopped breathing. Adriano smiled to himself before quietly speaking toward the room behind him. "Don't worry. Everything is under control." In that moment, Bella understood something terrifying. Her husband had not simply created secrets. He had built an entire world around them. Bella remained perfectly still inside the decorative alcove as Adriano stood only a few yards away. The soft golden light of the corridor reflected against the polished marble floor, while the city stretched endlessly beyond the enormous windows at the far end of the hall. For a moment, time itself seemed to slow. Adriano looked toward the elevators. Then he looked toward the entrance to the hallway. His expression remained calm. Bella had watched him negotiate billion-dollar agreements, settle conflicts between powerful families, and command the attention of entire rooms without raising his voice. She knew how observant he could be. She also knew that he trusted preparation more than luck, yet he never once glanced toward the alcove where she stood. "Everything is fine," he said quietly. A woman's voice drifted from inside the suite. "You're absolutely certain?" "Completely." Adriano smiled. The sight of that familiar smile sent a strange pain through Bella's chest. Years earlier, she had fallen in love with that smile because it appeared so genuine. Now, she found herself wondering how many different versions of Adriano Moretti existed beneath the surface. Without another word, he stepped back into the suite and closed the door. Bella released the breath she had been holding. Her hands were trembling again. She looked down at the white gift box resting against her arm. The pale blue ribbon remained perfectly tied. Inside the box, the tiny knitted booties still waited to be given to the man she had married. Suddenly, the elevator chimed. The sound echoed through the corridor. The doors slid open. Bella stepped inside immediately and pressed the button leading to the lobby. The door slowly began closing. Then a hand appeared between them. The doors opened once more. Adriano stood there. For a single heartbeat, neither of them moved. Surprise flashed across his face. Then confusion appeared. Then almost instantly, both expressions disappeared. The smile returned. "Bella," he said. His voice sounded warm and natural. The transformation happened so quickly that another person might never have noticed it. Bella noticed every detail. The slight widening of his eyes, the brief tension in his jaw, the fraction of a second that passed before he spoke. Years of studying financial fraud had taught her one simple truth. The first reaction was often the honest one. Everything afterward was strategy. "Adriano," she answered softly. He stepped into the elevator. "What are you doing here?" Bella forced herself to smile. "I wanted to surprise you." Another pause followed. It lasted no longer than a second, but she noticed it. Adriano had always possessed extraordinary self-control. While other men lost their tempers, he remained calm. While others celebrated victories, he remained disciplined. Investors admired that quality. Now Bella saw another possibility. Perhaps it was not discipline. Perhaps it was practice. "You should have told me you were coming," he said. "Then it wouldn't have been a surprise." He laughed quietly. "That's true." His eyes moved toward the white gift box in her hands. "What's that?" "Something for you." He gently kissed her forehead. The familiar scent of his cologne surrounded her. For years, that scent had represented safety, comfort, and home. Today, it reminded her of the woman waiting inside Suite 3108. "How was your flight?" he asked. "Pleasant." "And the baby?" "Healthy." His hand moved gently against her shoulder. "You look tired." Bella looked directly into his eyes. "It's been a long day. I'm sorry I haven't been home more often." "So am I." The elevator continued its descent. Soft music played quietly above their heads. Adriano glanced toward the closing numbers above the doors. Bella studied his reflection in the polished metal wall. The man standing beside her looked exactly like the man she had loved for 5 years. That was what frightened her most. The doors opened into the crowded lobby. Adriano smiled once again. "I have one more meeting upstairs," he explained. Wait for me downstairs. I won't be long. Meeting? Bella almost laughed. Instead, she nodded. Of course. He kissed her forehead once more before turning toward the private elevators. Halfway across the lobby, he suddenly stopped walking. Without turning around, he reached into his pocket, removed his phone, and read a message that had just appeared on the screen. Then he smiled. And somehow, Bella knew that the message had come from the woman he had left behind. Bella sat alone beside the enormous windows overlooking the Chicago River, while darkness slowly settled across the city. Below, thousands of lights reflected against the water, like scattered pieces of glass. People hurried along crowded sidewalks, taxis disappeared into streams of traffic, and distant music drifted upward from the streets. The entire city continued moving as though nothing extraordinary had happened. Yet, Bella knew that everything had changed. The white gift box rested on the table in front of her. Every few minutes, her fingers unconsciously brushed against the pale blue ribbon tied around it. The tiny knitted booties inside had been created with love, patience, and hope. Now they felt like evidence from another lifetime. Her phone vibrated. Adriano, where are you? Bella stared at the message. A second notification appeared. I'll be finished soon. Another message followed almost immediately. I've missed you. Bella slowly placed the phone face down on the table. For years, those words would have filled her heart with happiness. Now, she found herself wondering whether Adriano had sent similar messages while Bianca Rixa sat only a few feet away from him. The thought disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. The affair mattered. But something far more dangerous was hidden beneath it. Bella opened the notes application once more and carefully reviewed everything she had written. The transfer will happen after the birth. She trusts me. The child changes nothing. Once she signs, everything becomes irreversible. By then, she will have no leverage left. The council knows only what it needs to know. They don't have enough. Bella read the sentences repeatedly. Then, another memory surfaced. 3 days earlier, a large envelope had arrived at the estate. Several yellow markers had been attached to the pages inside, indicating where her signature was required. Adriano had explained that the papers concerned routine adjustments to inheritance structures before the baby's arrival. At the time, she had believed him. Now she wondered why routine documents would require such urgency. Her phone vibrated again. This time, the name displayed on the screen belonged to Lorenzo Belandi. Bella answered immediately, Lorenzo. The older man's voice remained calm. Isabella. Almost no one called her by her full name anymore. I need your help, she said quietly. Silence followed. Then Lorenzo spoke again. What happened? Bella looked toward the river beyond the glass. I believe someone has been lying to me for a very long time. An hour later, she found herself sitting inside Lorenzo's private office. Shelves filled with leather-bound books lined the walls, while a fire burned quietly inside a stone fireplace. The old attorney listened without interrupting, as Bella repeated every sentence she had heard. When she finished speaking, he removed his glasses and folded his hands together. Did you enter the suite? No. Did you record the conversation? No. Did you access any private files? No. He nodded approvingly. Good. Bella frowned. Good. Very good. He leaned back in his chair. Because you have not contaminated anything. Bella lowered her eyes toward the white gift box resting in her lap. Lorenzo, I think Adriano is moving assets. I know. Bella looked up instantly. The attorney's expression remained unreadable. What do you mean? For the past several months, certain members of the family council have raised concerns regarding unusual transactions involving shipping companies, investment funds, and holding corporations connected to the Moretti organization. Bella felt her pulse quicken. Why wasn't I told? Because no one imagined that you were involved. And now? Now I am no longer certain. Lorenzo rose from his chair and crossed the room. Moments later, he returned carrying a thick folder. He placed it carefully on the desk. Bella immediately recognized Adriano's signature. Then she saw something else, her own name. Isabella Romano Moretti. Printed across dozens of pages. Lorenzo slowly opened the folder. I think, he said quietly, it is finally time for you to understand exactly what kind of empire you married into. And for the first time in 5 years, Bella was not entirely certain that she wanted to know the answer. Bella stared at the thick folder resting on Lorenzo Belandi's desk. Outside the tall windows of the office, Chicago glittered beneath the darkness, like an ocean of scattered diamonds. The city looked beautiful from a distance. Beautiful things, Bella had learned, often concealed dangerous truths. Lorenzo slowly untied the black ribbon holding the documents together. "Before you read any further," he said quietly, "you need to understand something. The Moretti family was built long before Adriano was born. Fortunes have been made, alliances have been formed, and enemies have disappeared. Every generation leaves something behind for the next one: money, influence, power, secrets." Bella lowered her eyes toward the pages spread across the desk. "What exactly am I looking at?" "The foundation of the empire." One document contained ownership records connected to shipping companies operating in Europe and South America. Another listed investment groups registered in Switzerland, Singapore, and Luxembourg. Several names appeared repeatedly across the pages. Some belonged to business partners, others belonged to relatives. A few belonged to people Bella had never heard of before. Then she saw the dates. Her heart skipped a beat. Every transfer had occurred within the previous 6 months. "That's impossible," she whispered. "Unfortunately, it isn't." Lorenzo removed another folder from a locked drawer. "These are the documents Adriano sent to the estate 3 days ago." Bella immediately recognized the yellow tabs attached to the pages. Her signature was required in 7 different places. She began reading. The first document appeared harmless enough. It referred to succession planning and temporary authority adjustments in preparation for the birth of the child. The second document was different. Her breathing slowed. The third was even worse. Voting authority over several family companies would transfer automatically under specific circumstances. Access rights connected to Romano family holdings would be modified. Emergency control measures would be reassigned. Then Bella discovered something that caused the color to drain from her face. The final clause would become effective immediately after the birth of her son. She looked up. He was using the baby. Lorenzo remained silent. "He was using our son. It appears that way." Bella leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. Suddenly, dozens of memories returned to her. Adriano encouraging her to postpone reviewing financial reports. Adriano insisting that certain matters were too complicated for her to worry about. Adriano reminding her that she should focus on the child instead of business affairs. At the time, she had interpreted those words as affection. Now they sounded like instructions. Another question surfaced in her mind. "What about Bianca?" Lorenzo's expression darkened. "That question concerns me." "Why?" "Because Bianca Rixa has disappeared." Bella frowned. "What do you mean?" "Her apartment is empty. Her phone has been disconnected. 3 members of her security team have also vanished." An uncomfortable silence settled over the room. Bella slowly lowered her gaze toward the folder once more. Someone is cleaning up evidence, perhaps. Her phone suddenly vibrated. An unfamiliar number appeared on the screen. Bella answered cautiously. "Hello," a deep voice spoke immediately. "Mrs. Moretti, my name is Marco De Luca. I am the security director at the Valmont Hotel." Bella straightened in her chair. "Yes. Who?" "I understand that Mr. Belandi represents you. I cannot discuss private information, but I can confirm that a preservation request has been received. The relevant access records and corridor footage have been secured." "Thank you. There is something else you should know." Bella glanced toward Lorenzo. "Go on." "Your husband received an automated notification from the family travel account approximately 4 hours before your arrival." Bella's eyes widened. "He knew I was coming." "Yes." The room became perfectly silent. Suddenly, Adriano's words echoed inside her mind. "She believes she's surprising me." He had known. He had always known. The most frightening part was not that he had expected her arrival. It was that he had allowed it to happen. And for the first time, Bella found herself wondering whether she had interrupted the plan or whether she had been part of it from the very beginning. 3 days later, the city awakened beneath a gray winter sky while hundreds of black vehicles moved quietly toward the Moretti family's Grand Council Hall overlooking the Chicago River. For nearly a century, the building had stood as a symbol of power, wealth, loyalty, and fear. Generations of politicians, financiers, judges, industrialists, and underworld figures had passed through its enormous bronze doors. Alliances had been formed there. Fortunes had been built there. Empires had fallen there. Today, another empire was about to face judgment. Bella stood silently before the mirror inside her private suite, while a soft snowfall drifted beyond the windows. She wore a dark blue dress that flowed gracefully around her 8-month-old pregnancy. Her dark hair rested against her shoulders, and the small white gift box remained in her hands exactly as it had on the day she arrived in Chicago. Only Bella herself had changed. 3 weeks earlier, she had crossed the country to surprise the man she loved. Now she was preparing to face the man she no longer recognized. Lorenzo adjusted his tie as he stepped into the room. "The council members have arrived," he said quietly. Bella turned toward him. "How many?" "All of them. And Adriano. He believes today's agreement will proceed exactly as planned." Bella lowered her eyes toward the white ribbon wrapped around the gift box. "Then he still doesn't understand." Lorenzo studied her carefully. "Are you certain you wish to do this?" Bella gently rested one hand against her stomach. A small movement answered her. She smiled faintly. "No." "Then why are you here?" "Because some truths become heavier every day they remain hidden." Outside, the sound of approaching engines echoed across the stone courtyard. Bella stepped toward the window. Dozens of men and women were entering the building. Some represented the legitimate businesses controlled by the family. Others represented powerful allies whose names rarely appeared in newspapers, despite the enormous influence they possessed. At precisely 10 o'clock, another vehicle arrived. Adriano stepped out. Even from a distance, his presence commanded attention. His black coat moved slightly in the cold wind, while members of his security team followed several steps behind him. Journalists gathered near the entrance immediately raised their cameras. Adriano simply smiled. The world still belonged to him. At least that was what he believed. Inside the Grand Council chamber, enormous chandeliers illuminated marble columns, gold decorations, and portraits of powerful men who had once controlled vast fortunes. A long table occupied the center of the room, while hundreds of invited guests filled the surrounding seats. Bella quietly took her place near the back of the chamber. Minutes later, Adriano walked onto the platform prepared for the ceremony. Applause immediately followed. The great alliance between the Moretti family and several international partners would officially be announced that afternoon. Newspapers had already called it the most important expansion in the family's history. Adriano stood confidently beneath banners displaying the values that had guided the family for generations: honor, strength, loyalty, legacy. Bella could not stop herself from noticing the irony. Adriano began speaking. His voice was calm, powerful, and perfectly controlled. He spoke about family, responsibility, trust, sacrifice, and the future. Every sentence sounded sincere. Every gesture appeared natural. Every smile seemed effortless. For a moment, Bella almost found herself believing him again. Then she remembered the laughter from Suite 3108. She remembered the signatures. She remembered the unborn child sleeping beneath her heart. Suddenly, movement near the entrance interrupted the ceremony. The chairman of the independent council rose slowly to his feet. The room fell silent. The elderly man adjusted his glasses before unfolding a single sheet of paper. "Before today's proceedings continue," he announced, "the council has received information requiring immediate review. Therefore, this agreement is suspended until further notice." Whispers immediately spread across the chamber. Adriano remained perfectly still. "There must be some mistake," he said calmly. The chairman looked directly at him. "We are hoping that there is." For the first time in years, uncertainty appeared in Adriano Moretti's eyes. Then he turned toward the audience and finally saw Bella sitting among the guests. His expression changed instantly, because in that moment, he understood that his greatest enemy had never been sitting across the table. She had been standing beside him all along. Silence spread across the council chamber as hundreds of eyes turned toward Bella. For several long seconds, neither she nor Adriano moved. Enormous crystal chandeliers cast warm light across the marble floor, but the atmosphere inside the hall felt colder than the snowstorm gathering outside. Adriano recovered first. Throughout his life, he had learned how to regain control of any room he entered. Uncertainty rarely remained on his face for long. The shock that had appeared in his eyes vanished almost immediately. replaced by the calm confidence that had helped him build the Moretti Empire into one of the most powerful organizations in the country. He smiled. "Bella," he said warmly, extending one hand toward her. "I didn't know you would be joining us today." His voice was flawless. Years earlier, that same voice had persuaded investors to risk billions of dollars. It had settled disputes between rival families and convinced powerful people to trust him with their fortunes. Today, Bella heard something entirely different. Calculation. She rose slowly from her chair. The white gift box remained in her hands. Around her, whispers spread throughout the chamber. Some people looked confused. Others appeared nervous. A few elderly members of the council simply watched in silence, as though they already understood that the day was moving toward an unavoidable conclusion. Adriano took a step forward. "Everyone," he announced, "allow me to introduce my wife, Isabella Romano Moretti." The audience responded with polite applause. Adriano smiled once more. Perhaps Bella can reassure everyone that there has been some misunderstanding. Bella looked at him quietly. For one brief moment, she remembered the man she had married. She remembered their wedding day, their first home, and the countless nights they had spent planning the future together. Then she remembered the laughter behind the door of Suite 3108. The memory shattered the illusion. She walked toward the center of the chamber. Every footstep echoed against the polished floor. Lorenzo remained seated near the front of the room. The chairman of the council folded his hands together and watched silently. Bella finally stopped a few feet away from Adriano. "I only have one question," she said. Adriano's smile remained unchanged. "Go ahead." Bella's fingers tightened around the gift box. "Why did you tell me that the documents you sent to our home were routine family papers?" The smile disappeared. The entire chamber fell silent. Bella continued speaking. "Why did you describe them as temporary measures when they changed voting authority, succession rights, inheritance structures, and control over assets connected to the Romano family?" Adriano stared at her. "Bella, this isn't the proper place." "Really?" Her voice remained calm. "Because you seemed perfectly comfortable discussing them in Suite 3108. A wave of whispers immediately spread across the hall. For the first time since entering the chamber, Adriano appeared genuinely unsettled. "You misunderstood what you heard." Bella lowered her eyes toward the box in her hands. Slowly, she untied the pale blue ribbon. "I came to Chicago because I wanted to give you something." She opened the lid. Inside, the tiny blue booties rested beside the ultrasound photograph. Several people nearby lowered their heads. Others looked away completely. Bella carefully lifted the photograph into her hands. "I brought these because I thought our son deserved to see how happy his parents were when they learned he was coming into the world." Adriano's expression hardened. "Bella, no." Her voice remained soft. "I am not accusing you of crimes. I am not asking for explanations. I am asking a very simple question." She looked directly into his eyes. "Why did you expect me to sign documents you never intended me to understand?" The chairman slowly rose from his chair. "Until these matters are resolved," he announced, "all proceedings are officially suspended." The sound that followed was unlike anything Bella had ever heard. It was not anger. It was not outrage. It was fear. Because everyone inside the chamber suddenly understood the same thing. The most dangerous secret in the Moretti Empire had never been hidden inside bank accounts, secret agreements, or shell corporations. It had been hidden inside the man standing at the center of the room. The council chamber gradually emptied as snowfall covered the streets outside. Powerful men who had once spoken confidently about expansion, alliances, and fortunes now gathered in small groups, whispering among themselves. Telephones rang continuously. Attorneys hurried through the hallways. Advisors carried folders from one office to another. For the first time in many years, uncertainty had entered the heart of the Moretti Empire. Bella stood silently beside one of the enormous windows overlooking the river. The white gift box rested against her chest, while the city lights shimmered beneath the darkening sky. She could hear footsteps approaching long before the door opened. Adriano entered the room alone. The door closed quietly behind him. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. The silence between them felt strangely unfamiliar. Throughout their marriage, silence had always brought peace. Tonight, it brought questions. Adriano loosened his tie and slowly walked toward the table in the center of the room. Exhaustion covered his face. For the first time since Bella had met him, he looked less like the head of an empire and more like an ordinary man carrying an unbearable weight. "You should have come to me first," he said quietly. Bella turned toward him. "I did." Adriano frowned. "What do you mean?" "I traveled across the country carrying a gift for our son, and the man I believed was waiting for me." His expression darkened. "Bella, I found you in suite 3108. The room became perfectly silent. Adriano lowered his eyes. He did not deny it. Bella had expected anger, excuses, or accusations. Instead, she saw regret. That frightened her even more, because regret meant he understood exactly what he had done. "Bianca means nothing," he finally said. Bella shook her head. "You still don't understand." Adriano looked at her. "Then help me understand. This was never about Bianca." A shadow crossed his face. Bella slowly placed the white gift box on the table between them. "I heard you discussing signatures, transfers, holdings, succession rights, and investigations. I heard you say that our child changed nothing. I heard you speak about leverage." Adriano remained silent. "Tell me the truth." He walked toward the window and stared at the falling snow outside. "The alliance was failing," he finally said. "Investments were disappearing, debts were increasing, rival families were becoming impatient. People who once stood beside me were preparing to turn against me." Bella listened quietly. "I thought I could solve everything before anyone discovered the truth." "By transferring assets?" "Yes." "By lying to the council?" He hesitated. "Yes." "By manipulating me?" Another silence followed. "Yes." The answer struck harder than any denial. Bella felt the child move gently beneath her hand. "Why?" Adriano closed his eyes. "Because I believed I could control the outcome. Even after our son was born, I was trying to protect him." Bella stared at him in disbelief. "Protect him? Everything I built was for our family." "Everything?" She stepped closer. "Did you protect our family when you lied to me?" He said nothing. "Did you protect our family when you placed my inheritance at risk?" Again, silence. "Did you protect our family when you allowed another woman to sit beside you while discussing our child as though he were a business arrangement?" Adriano pressed both hands against the table. "I never wanted this to happen." Bella's eyes filled with tears. "That is the problem." He looked up. "What do you mean? You still believe this happened to you?" The words struck him like a physical blow. For years, Adriano had controlled every negotiation, every alliance, and every battle that crossed his path. He had learned to move people across the board like pieces in an elaborate game. Bella suddenly understood the terrible truth. He had been doing the same thing at home. He had managed investors. He had managed rivals. He had managed allies. And eventually, he had tried to manage his own family. Adriano slowly lowered his head. "Is there any way back?" he asked quietly. Bella looked down at the tiny blue booties resting inside the white box. Then she looked into the eyes of the man she had once trusted more than anyone else in the world. "A marriage can survive failure," she said softly, "but it cannot survive one person deciding that the truth belongs only to him." And for the first time in many years, Adriano Moretti had no answer. 6 months later, winter once again settled over Chicago. Snow drifted quietly across the city, while the waters of Lake Michigan reflected the pale light of the early morning sky. The newspapers that had once celebrated the unstoppable expansion of the Moretti Empire now carried entirely different headlines. Investigations continued. Attorneys moved constantly between courtrooms and corporate offices. Alliances that had taken decades to build had collapsed within months. The world had changed. So had Bella. She slowly pushed a stroller along a narrow path overlooking the lake, while a cold wind carried snowflakes through the air. Beneath a thick blue blanket, her son slept peacefully, completely unaware that his existence had altered the course of countless lives. She looked down and smiled. "Good morning, Nicholas." The little boy opened his eyes for a moment before curling his tiny fingers around hers. Bella's heart softened immediately. Throughout the long months that followed the collapse of the alliance ceremony, she had discovered that peace rarely arrived all at once. Instead, it appeared gradually, one quiet decision after another. She had moved into a new home overlooking the river. She had returned to work as a forensic analyst and devoted her time to helping families identify hidden transfers fraudulent agreements, and financial manipulation. After everything that had happened, she understood that deception rarely began with dramatic lies. It usually began with a simple sentence. "Trust me, you don't need to read this." Those words had almost cost her everything. Her phone vibrated gently inside her coat pocket. The message came from Lorenzo Belandi. The preservation orders remained active. The investigations were continuing. Several senior advisors connected to the Moretti organization had already resigned. Additional financial records had been discovered. Rival families had begun distancing themselves from the empire. Adriano himself remained under constant scrutiny. Bella never celebrated any of it. The pain was too deep for victory. Late that afternoon, she arrived at the Moretti estate for another scheduled visit. The enormous mansion stood exactly as it always had, surrounded by stone walls, iron gates, and armed guards. Years earlier, the sight had filled her with pride. Now it reminded her how easily strength could become isolation. Adriano was waiting inside the library. For a moment, Bella barely recognized him. The expensive suits remained, the authority remained, the confidence remained. But something else had disappeared. Certainty. He stood as Bella carefully lifted Nicholas into her arms before placing the child gently into his father's hands. Adriano's expression changed immediately. The powerful head of the Moretti Empire vanished. Only a father remained. Nicholas blinked twice before wrapping his tiny hand around one of Adriano's fingers. Adriano lowered his head. A tear rolled silently down his face. Bella had never seen him cry. Not once. "He's getting bigger," he whispered. "Yes, he has your eyes." Bella smiled faintly. Fortunately, Adriano looked down at his son once more. "Will he know that I loved him?" The question hung quietly between them. Bella adjusted the blanket resting around the child. She thought about the hotel suite, the hidden documents, the white gift box, the broken promises, the long nights that followed. Then she looked directly into Adriano's eyes. "He will know what you consistently show him." Adriano slowly nodded. For the first time in his life, there was no fortune large enough to purchase the future he wanted. Only time could do that. As the afternoon faded into evening, Bella prepared to leave. Before reaching the door, she paused. The white gift box remained exactly where she had left it months earlier. Adriano noticed her looking at it. "You never opened it again," he said quietly. Bella walked toward the table and carefully lifted the box into her hands. Slowly, she untied the ribbon. Inside, the tiny blue booties still rested beside the ultrasound photograph. She looked down at the picture and smiled. Months earlier, she had carried those gifts across the country to surprise the man she loved. Instead, she had discovered the truth. Adriano stepped forward. "Bella." She turned toward him. "Yes. Is there any chance that one day you'll forgive me?" Bella remained silent for a long moment. Finally, she answered, "Forgiveness and trust are not the same thing." Then she gently closed the lid of the box. Outside, the first light of morning began to appear beyond the horizon. Bella carried her son toward the waiting car. The cold wind moved softly around them, while snowflakes drifted across the ground. Behind her stood the empire Adriano had spent his entire life building. Ahead of her stood the life she intended to build herself. As she stepped forward, she finally understood the truth. The sounds behind the door of Suite 3108 had not destroyed her life. They had saved it. Adriano had spent years creating an empire powerful enough to control money, businesses, alliances, and people. Bella had spent a single season protecting something far more valuable, the truth. And in the end, only one of those legacies was strong enough to survive.